Friday, December 1st, 2017. Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. One of my missions here is trying to expose how linked the bankers, the government, the central banks are, and how they're out there to try to keep the general public blind, in the dark, and how they also encourage the general public to play their game. And what is their game? Well, it's to borrow and spend and to be profligate. Because if you don't borrow and spend and do, watch television and buy the latest gadgets, go on your one of your holidays a year, put it on your credit card, buy that new car with zero down, or it doesn't keep their system going. And why am I talking about this today? Well, because there's been an interesting speech by a Bank of England external member. What does that mean? Well, that means that he does some work for the Bank of England, or she, it could be a she, of course, and still works in the private sector. Well, yesterday, the other thing I was looking at was listening to some old speeches by Eustace Mullins, who wrote some very interesting books, which I have on my shelf. The Secrets of the Federal Reserve, a lot of interesting books about the banking system. And he says, that the government debt, or is not the government debt, it's the taxpayers' debt, because that's the how the banking system is designed right now, the central banking system. It's based on interest-bearing currency. And you might not think that currency that you hold, pays any interest, but it's backed by debt that does pay interest. And he talks about the big difference between currency that doesn't pay interest, which the government or the treasury can issue, and the one that the central banks and their banking, cartels, their member banks issue, which is out of thin air, and you have to pay interest on it. And that's what, has ballooned the national debts everywhere in the West, especially in the UK, in the US, Southern Europe, you name it. So yesterday we had a fellow by the name of Richard Sharp, and he made a speech to University College London. And it's a shame that, these guys are always speaking at higher educational institutions, to brainwash, young people, unfortunately. And the title of his speech is "It Pays to Be Paranoid: The Importance of Fiscal Space." Speech by Richard Sharp. I read the speech. It's about 12 pages maybe on PDF. And what does fiscal space mean? That's another terminology that these people use to hoodwink you, or to keep you in the dark, to make it think that it's something like that you can't control, that it's scientific. Well, basically, fiscal space is the government's capacity to, to steal money from you, to bail out the bankers. He doesn't say that, of course. He says that, in 2007, 2008, there was a great financial crisis, and the government has had to borrow £1 trillion since then, to stabilize the system, or more, to save all the banks that, and their shenanigans. I know the public is the other side of the coin, but the public trust these people. They trust the politicians who regulate these banks. So they are the big culprit, in my opinion. So he's saying that right now there isn't that much fiscal space, and that if there is a financial crisis, we could be in trouble in the UK. He's a member of the FPC, Financial Policy Committee. So this committee was created after the 07-08 crisis, and he's an external member. And guess, I went through, it's very interesting to go through these people background. And the Bank of England website says Richard Sharp has over 30 years of experience in the financial sector, including commercial banking, derivatives, fixed income, private equity, and investment banking. He spent 23 years, drumroll, at Goldman Sachs, where he held a number of senior roles, most recently as chairman of Goldman Sachs' principal investment business in Europe. Prior to this, he worked in both commercial banking and investment banking, drumroll, for JP Morgan. So he left Goldman Sachs in 07. I was looking at his CV. You can go I'll put the website for, the link for the Bank of England. They've also got his CV. You can see where he's working now. Well, it says currently Richard is Chief Executive of DII Capital UK Advisors LLP and a partner in Roundshield Partners LLP. You try to look at these firms, what they do. They're private and limited liability. Their websites, you have to be like a client to log in. But I found an article, actually, about this guy. Where is it here? Yeah, it's on thebureauinvestigates.com, and it's from 3 years ago, over 3 years ago. Bank of England denies key advisor Richard Sharp breach rules in attending fundraiser. So this guy was actually nominated to be a member of the FPC by George Osborne, ex-Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK, equivalent of the Secretary of the Treasury. And this article just goes to say that he donated £400,000 to the Conservative Party. And yes, and they found out, what Roundshield does. He says, he says the Bureau can further reveal that the banker, who has donated more than £420,000 to the Tories, has since become a partner in Roundshield, a firm that lends, listen to this, to distressed businesses and buys assets from them, including residential property, care-related real estate, and agricultural machinery. Sharp's position as one of 4 partners in this commercial venture may raise fresh questions about his access to privileged confidential bank papers on UK financial stability and mortgage lending. So this guy is like, he's got a foot at Goldman Sachs, because I think, if you work for over 20 years at Goldman Sachs and you're very senior, it's a bit like being a CIA agent. You can never leave the CIA. You just move somewhere else to disguise, what you're really doing. So this guy's got his foot at Goldman Sachs, his foot in private equity, and his foot in the Bank of England, his foot in the government. And now he's warning us that the UK could actually become like Venezuela. He mentions Venezuela in this paper. As I said, I'll put the link and you can read it. He mentioned Venezuela. He says, Venezuela was once a AAA rated country, which actually I didn't know. The UK now is not AAA, of course. It used to be. It was downgraded by S&P 2.5 years ago from, actually a year ago, June 27th. They were downgraded after the Brexit vote, I guess, from AAA to AA. Moody's also downgraded them in September this year from AA1 to AA2. So the UK's lost its top rating from Moody's and S&P, which are the major rating agencies. I know you can't really read too much from these rating agencies, but basically now he's saying that the financial markets could be in, under threat, and that things could come from anywhere. Models are not particularly, they help guide these guys, but it could come out of left field. And he even mentions that they had, I think, Nicholas Taleb, who wrote the book, the Black Swan book, at the Bank of England, I think last year, at a conference with them, talking about unforeseen events, and that's why he uses the title as well of this speech. I think, yeah, the speech was yesterday. It pays to be paranoid, because that's what that's the term Nicholas Taleb used. It pays to be paranoid. But one thing I find really interesting, is that this guy will be ready. It says in the article from the Bureau Investigates that he's worth over 100 million. And interesting that he got out of Goldman Sachs just before, everything imploded. He had probably his money out, and he was ready to pick up the pieces. He's working with, distressed credit. And that's why I tell people, and I know it's not easy these days for young people, even for older people, to keep your standard of living without borrowing. So that's why I keep saying, you need to try to get out of this system. Try to not have things you don't need, and try to borrow, or as least as possible, or not borrow at all. Get rid of your credit card. If you can't pay for something cash, you can't have it. I know it sounds, how can I say, harsh, but if you really want to fight the system, if you think the system is unfair, this is what you have to do. You can't play their game. Yeah, just wanted to mention this story, and it just goes to show the fiscal space for him then is, the public has been fleeced enough. We have to do something about it, or else, everything is going to implode and we're going to become like Venezuela. So here's a guy, Goldman Sachs man, Bank of England man, government man, warning us about that. And I guess this is my job to warn you about this. There is an article in the Telegraph about this speech yesterday, but I looked at it online. I don't subscribe to the Telegraph, but it's in their premium section. So if you don't subscribe to it, you can't read it. And I found something on Reuters, but it was only a couple of paragraphs. They don't mention about his background. So this is why I'm here to let the general public know about these things, because I like investigating this and looking, at the people's background. So, if you think this helps, I would welcome donations to the channel. As you know, Google and YouTube have been censoring a lot of videos. Don't get me wrong, I'm still earning some revenues from YouTube, but I think it could be better. So if you'd like to donate, there's some links below in the description. I accept dollars, I accept gold, I accept Bitcoin, Ethereum, it's all there below in the description. And I'd like to thank all the people who support the channel by watching and having an interest in the channel. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, share it, subscribe to my channel as well if you haven't yet. And you can also follow me on twitter.com and on steemit.com. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.